So this is our weekly affirmation that I, or whoever at the time decides to write it. And this is an affirmation that I hope you will hold for yourself for the week. And it's on our email blast. I really hope that you write this down because I think it's important that we affirm this to ourselves. So let's say this together at least 2 times, please. My decisions are right and good, for my indwelling Christ is my light. Let's do it again. My decisions are right and good, for my indwelling Christ is my light. I'm going to start you out with a little story. See if you can relate to this. Little Tommy was told over and over that if he got his feet wet, he would catch a cold and be sick. He was told by his mother, who in his mind represented the highest authority. One day he went out in the rain without his boots, and when he returned, his mother was all upset and loudly predicted, "Why didn't you mind me? Now you are going to get..." Oh, you know this story too. I have a mother like that too, right? "Better take this warm milk and get right to bed." And sure enough, Tommy ran a fever that night. Well, that did it. Tommy's suggestible subconscious mind totally accepted the belief that when you get your feet wet, you get sick. And to this day, as a grown man, when Tommy gets his feet wet for any reason, his subconscious immediately carries out the terms of that belief, and he gets a cold. Anybody relate to that? Yeah. I know just even a little part of this is when I used to work in the restaurant, when I had the restaurant business, and one of my workers would come in and they were sick, right? You know how that is. Back in the day of sports, now we try not to do that, but who didn't? You pushed through, right, and you went to work. It's just a cold. It's just the flu. So, and I remember before I found these teachings about training my mind, I remember thinking, oh no, by Friday I'm going to be sick. And sure enough, by Friday I would be sick. You know, unity and new thought is often looked at as works of the devil. Do you know why that is? Well, it's because we question you. We question you to think differently. We question you, new thought and unity, we question you to question everything. We also encourage you to experience new thinking. We encourage you to unlearn old memes and experiment with a new way of looking at the old beliefs that you have held in mind that don't seem to work anymore. And relate to some of these things from your childhood, from your adulthood, right? And so there's kind of that feeling of you're in a cult, right? And it cracks me up because people in mainstream will say they're trying to tell you how to think. And I'm like, no, it's actually the opposite. They're telling me to question what I think and that I have my own independent thinking mind. I titled this talk, Learning to Unlearn. Now, as you search Google, you're going to see it as many, many people are speaking about learning to unlearn to relearn. But I decided to just shorten it today because I think I want to focus on the unlearning part of this. Can we have the first slide, please? See it? When any real progress is made, we unlearn and learn anew what we thought we knew before. Henry David Thoreau. Now let's see what Buddhism says. A scholar tries to learn something every day. A student of Buddhism tries to unlearn something every day. I have a friend, good friend, and he is all about learning. The new and best technology, he is all about learning it and learning some more. And you know how technology is constantly changing, so there's this constant learning, but he's like excited about it and overwhelmed about it, and he's building the best equipment. He's learning and learning some more until he got so gived out from learning that he literally almost checked out of this planet. He got so in his mind of learning, that he lost himself and didn't take care of himself. He didn't take care of his family because he was so busy always updating the new and greatest thing in his home office. Came out for meals, sometimes with family, sometimes not. Know people like this? Maybe not, maybe so. Yesterday, Saturday, yes. Friday night, Michael and I found a movie called The Best of Enemies. After we watched it, we were both so taken back, and then a little bit later on, I'm going to tell you why Michael was so taken back by this movie. But for me, it was just hitting on all cylinders, and how appropriate that it's being shown right around Martin Luther King Day, which we celebrate tomorrow. And yesterday, I'm getting ready to watch it for the second time because it hit me so much, and I felt like this is a big part of what I want to talk about. And as I'm turning it back on, and I think it was on Amazon Prime, I think is what I found it on. But anyway, I'm texting people in the congregation that I have their phone numbers in my phone. And I'm like, you got to watch this movie. I'm going to be talking about this tomorrow. And be sure that you watch the credits afterwards. The movie is called The Best of Enemies. Write it down. You're not going to regret seeing it. The Best of Enemies. This takes place, it's based on a true story, takes place in Durham, North Carolina in the late 60s. Anybody have an idea what might have been going on in South Carolina in the late 60s? Just the start of integration. They were still standing firm on segregation. The Ku Klux Klan was extremely loud and extremely present. But there was a movement to segregate the schools. They had already integrated restaurants, bathrooms, drinking fountains, the buses, but there was a standoff about integrating our children in schools, mixing blacks and whites together in the school system. So it was between this Ku Klux Klan, white supremacy, and African Americans. Total divide, total hate. I'm going to just say one was full of hatred, the other one was full of fear. This was a blaring example of both sides throughout this movie having to learn to unlearn. And they'd have to unlearn through a facilitator who comes in, African American, by the way, who comes in to do what's called charrettes. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that term. Charrettes means a meeting in which all stakeholders in a project attempt to resolve conflicts and map out solutions. So I was thinking to myself, well, this church, our board, we need to start using that term once in a while, to have a charrette. Because it's not just about racial. A charrette is a really good tool in business, in churches, in communities, in PTAs. They're not called PTAs anymore. What are they called now? PTOs? Is that it? Yeah. I know it's a new word for it. Well, new to me. They had to learn to unlearn their fear and their prejudices and their hatred, and they had to rise up. Both groups had to rise up. I'm going to say it again. The best of enemies. Check it out. So then, I also was given by somebody at the Y in my swimming group who says, Kathy, and they all know what I do for a living, and they are always recommending things. But this one person, her name is Val, when she recommends something, it's kind of like that E.F. Hutton. When Val recommends it, Kathy listens. And I'm like, I got to go get this book. If she's saying this is something you got to read, Kathy, because they all know how many books I get hit with, right? The Holy Man. The Holy Man. I was only able to snag 2 copies of this used from half-price books. They brought them, shipped them in. So we have 2 used copies in the bookstore, but 3 or 4 more are coming this week. This is such a great, easy read. The chapters are so short. It's one of those, because it's like the next chapter, you're like, I go like, this is me. I'm like, oh, it's only two pages. I can read 2 more. Oh, that one's only a page and a half. I'll read 1 more, right? Next thing I know, I'm halfway through the book, and it's 11 o'clock at night. It is a story about, of course, the holy man who lives way up in a hermitage, and pilgrims are coming to seek the holy man for what? Answers to their problems, right? And everybody in here's got problems, right? But it takes a long time to make the pilgrimage up the hill, a very long time. And so many people end up finding the answers to their problems while they're in line walking up the hill to meet the holy man. They also get very little wisdom from the holy man. I'm not going to spoil this because it's in the first chapter, but let's say that Taylor comes to me and I'm the holy woman, right? And I open the door and I usher her in, and with that I say, come on. Doors everywhere, doors everywhere, doors everywhere. And thank you, Taylor. See ya. Yeah. It's not all like that. He spends time with those who he knows needs to spend time. He knows that Taylor's already worked her stuff all the way up the hill, and now you need to go. You've seen me, now go. It is really a very good book. What it is to me was it just lined up perfect with this talk, because every single person in that line was learning to unlearn from whatever it was they were bringing to the holy man. Again, another good read. The Holy Man. And stay with it, because sometimes you'll think, what are they going? Where's he going now? Who's coming to see him? Stay with it, because it does have a storyline, and the ending will be a little bit of a surprise to you as well. Let's look at that third slide, please. Good quote. You must unlearn what you have been programmed to believe since birth. That software no longer serves you if you want to live in a world where all things are possible. Wow. I know an awful lot of people my age, very good friends of mine, that are still holding on to many, many childhood beliefs and teachings because of fear of stepping outside the box, fear of questioning, fear of seeing God a little bit differently. Fear, I'm not sure. Maybe they still think that you can be struck by lightning. I don't know, but I understand it. I can understand it. Unlearning is so important. I'm going to give you 5 steps to unlearning. I don't have a slide for this. I found this late last night, and I'm like, I can just give this to you in a snippet. How do you unlearn? So if you think about it, you all have done this. You have all done some unlearning of some kind. Okay, and take it from your childhood and take it from little Tommy, right? Okay, with our way of thinking now, and my energy healer practitioners out here, I know will agree with this, that I can go out and get my feet wet, and as long as I've unlearned that story I got as a child, I'm going to be fine. And I don't give that part any power, and I hold to my health. So we know that once you break that meme, you know you have the power. You have the power. It doesn't mean you don't get sick. But it does mean that every time you get your feet wet, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get sick. So, 5 steps. Number 1, challenge what you think you know. Challenge what you think you know. When I first came to Unity and I started taking Unity classes, oh my gosh, did it challenge everything that I was raised to believe, and it challenged everything. It was like, but it spoke true. So I kept experimenting with that. And I kept experimenting. Oh, I think I'm going to get to that. Number 2 is question everything. Just because somebody says it so doesn't make it so, right? Question everything until you're clear and you feel it's true for you. Ask why. Stay curious. That was one of the worst things I could ever do as a child, was ask why. Because I said so. So I think part of that is why I'm so curious as an adult. And I have this deep need to understand, because as a child, I was that curious. But I got shut down every time I asked, because you don't need to know why. It's because I said so. So challenge what you think you know. Question everything. Number 3, step outside of your circle of influence. Step outside of your comfort zone. That is what that movie was all about. Stepping out of their circle of influence. The black community and the white supremacy community had to really step out of their comfort zone in order to meet somewhere in the middle. Number 4 is believe. Believe that you will become more with this new thought process. Number 5 is accept and adapt. Accept that we are creatures of habit, are we not? And accept that many things that you know might be false. You've all experienced that, right? from childhood on, as you've experimented or you've questioned and you found out, oh my goodness, I know when I came here, I was like, oh, really? I really thought God was up there and that's where I had to pray. Many, many things to that. So, challenge what you think you know, question everything, step outside your comfort zone, believe and accept and adapt. And when you do that, you are on the road to unlearning and relearning. Let's go to that next slide. Recognize that unlearning is your highest form of learning. And let's go to the next one. If you want to become a butterfly, do as the caterpillar. Unlearn your crawling skills to learn your new flying skills. Yes. So let me share a real quick story about why that movie meant so much to my husband, Michael. Michael was raised in New Orleans in the 60s, the late 60s. Now, he has and has always had extremely loving, accepting parents who never spoke of prejudice. Never. But they are in the midst of New Orleans, and there's literally, if many of you have been to New Orleans, you know it's below sea level. So in New Orleans, they've created, Michael calls them ditches. That's what he grew up to call them. It's the ditch. And that's when it rains, it goes into the ditch, and then it flows out to the water. Okay? And that stops the flooding for the communities and for all the businesses, hopefully, unless we have a hurricane. So, Michael's house lived on the edge of the ditch. On the other side of the ditch is the black community, but affluent black community. Michael lives on this side of the ditch in the poor white community. Every day after school, there is rock throwing and 2x4 throwing across the ditch. As soon as school lets out, fling, 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 name calling. I said, and they said the words that we know, that they called each other kids. Just that was their after school activity every single day, throwing rocks at each other and 2x4s and name calling, and then you go home. Now, his parents, yes, isn't this sad? What the kids were being raised to hate each other because the schools were segregated. Okay? So he was raised not from his parents. He was raised from his environment to hate blacks. And the blacks were raised, whether it was family or environment, to hate whites. And he lived this. Now his parents, well, it's a longer story, I'll tell you, because Michael's mother is a kindergarten teacher and preschool teacher, and she ends up teaching kids at an all-black school. And every day she would drive to school, and she would go through the black community, and there would be these are her words, big black men sitting on their porches in their rocking chairs, just watching this white woman driving through their neighborhood every morning early. Never saying a word. And she just go on drive to school. One day her car breaks down on her way to school in the middle of the black neighborhood. And she's like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And she starts to get out of the car, and 3 of these men who she has seen at 3 different houses, just sitting on the rocking chair watching her every day, help her and tow her car to school. They knew that she was teaching their children. So now his dad gets transferred to Springfield, Ohio. Okay, we're not in Louisiana anymore. We are in Springfield, Ohio. Schools are integrated. And the first day he goes to school, and the teacher says, "You're the new kid. You're going to sit here." And then the rest of the kids come in. He got there early because his mom was a teacher. Anybody had a mom that's a teacher? You always have to go to school with mom. So you're there an hour early. And so he's sitting in this seat waiting, and in comes a black boy, sits right next to him. He's like, I can't sit next to him. I don't think I'm not supposed to sit next to him. And then here comes all the other kids. He's like, I guess this is the way school is here. Unlearned that fast. It was a story that really, I watched him tell it, and I've heard him tell it many times, and it still touches his heart really heavy, that he has to look at that movie and he has to own that he was like that. And it wasn't because he was raised like that, but it was because of his environment. So I want to leave you with a quote that, not the slide yet, but this is a quote from Martin Luther King. It says, "I am convinced that people hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other, and they don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other, and they don't communicate with each other because they are separated from each other." Isn't that the truth? Whether it's racial, political, neighborhood problems, condo association problems, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. And boy, if this doesn't wrap us back around to the beginning of service again. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Only love can do that. You're in store for a really, really great song that Leslie Porter introduced me to in honor of Martin Luther King Day. And it really, when I listened to the words, it touched my heart deeply. So I know Marielle will give a short introduction to that. So just stay with us. But for what I want to tell you as I close here is encourage yourself to unlearn. And it's good. You're on the right track. You're on the right track if you're questioning your thoughts, your beliefs, your reactions to things. Question them. Go deeper. Have a conversation with somebody that's not in your circle of influence. Meet somebody out of your comfort zone. Talk to your server. Talk to your server. They're a human being. Talk to the person at the drive-through window. All they usually do is hear complaints. Talk to them. Tell them how nice they look. I'm really big on, because I notice girls with their long painted fingernails. So I'll go, because, they got to hand you your money, right? Or your credit card back. And I'm like, oh, your nails look pretty. And you just watch their smile. It's that easy, people. So with that, I close with Namaste, which means to me that the Christ presence in me truly sees and honors that Christ presence in each and every one of you. Namaste.